There are stories that move our hearts. Stories that remind us what love truly means. But some stories, they change us. They stay, echoing in the quiet corners of our minds. This is one such story. The story of a mother named Elena and her son, Eric. Before we begin, if you believe that love, sacrifice, and hope still exist in this world, then take a moment to subscribe to Movement of Life. Because here, we don't just tell stories. We feel them. Now, let the story begin. Elena lived in a small town, quiet, simple, forgotten by the world. Her days began before the sun rose and ended long after the moon had climbed into the sky. She wasn't rich. She didn't wear fine clothes or jewels. But she carried something rarer, unbreakable faith. She had only one dream: that her son, Eric, would one day live a life better than hers. Eric was a bright child. Curious eyes. A heart full of questions. He would sit beside her at night as she worked by candlelight, stitching clothes for people who never even remembered her name. "Mother," he'd whisper, "why do you work so much?" And she'd smile gently. "Because, my love, dreams cost time. And time is all I have." Years passed like pages in a worn-out book. Elena worked endlessly, washing, stitching, cooking, so Eric could go to school. Every morning, she'd hand him a small lunch wrapped in cloth and whisper, "Learn something new today." Even when she was tired, even when her hands trembled from exhaustion, she never let him see her weakness. Because love, real love, is not about saying "I care." It's about showing it, quietly, endlessly, without expecting anything back. But life doesn't always reward kindness. Sometimes, it tests it. One evening, as she returned home from work, the landlord stood at the door. "Elena," he said coldly, "you're 2 months behind on rent." She lowered her eyes. "I'll pay soon. Please, just give me one more week." He sighed. "You've said that before. Next week, if you don't pay, you'll have to leave." That night, while Eric slept peacefully, Elena sat near the window, tears falling silently into the dark. She looked at her rough hands and whispered, "How long can I keep going?" Then she glanced at her son, sleeping with a faint smile. And she knew the answer. "As long as he needs me." And so, she worked harder. Every sunrise became a promise. Every scar on her hands, a symbol of love. But destiny had another storm waiting. One that would change everything. Life has a strange way of testing those who love the most. It doesn't whisper its warnings. It strikes when the heart is unprepared. Days turned into weeks. And the rent deadline drew near. Elena worked from dawn till midnight. Barely sleeping, barely eating. Her hands bled from stitching. But she smiled through the pain. Because that's what mothers do. They hide their scars behind gentle smiles.
One afternoon, as she was returning home from the tailor's shop, she saw people gathered outside her small house. The landlord stood there, arms crossed, eyes cold. "Elena," he said, "I warned you." Behind him, 2 men were already pulling out her furniture. Her little table, her son's books. Even the old wooden chair she loved so much. She ran forward, pleading, "Please. Just one more week. I have almost enough. I just need." But her voice was drowned in the noise. The landlord turned away. And in that moment, her heart broke. Not because she lost a house, but because her son would lose his home. Eric stood silently by the gate, his eyes filled with confusion. "Mother, why are they taking our things?" Elena couldn't answer. She just hugged him tight and whispered, "Because the world doesn't wait for love, my son." That night, they slept under the open sky. The stars above, the only witnesses to her silent tears. But even then, she didn't give up. She took Eric's hand and said, "Listen to me. We've lost our walls, but not our will. We still have each other. And that's more than enough." The next morning, Elena walked to the city, a place she had never dared to go before. She searched for work everywhere. Cafes, shops, streets. And finally found a small job cleaning tables in a bakery. The pay was almost nothing. But it was enough to buy bread and hope. Eric went with her every day, waiting outside while she worked. He never complained. He would sit quietly, drawing on scraps of paper, dreaming of the future his mother once promised. Sometimes, she would glance through the bakery window and see him smiling at the birds or talking to strangers. And in those tiny moments, the world didn't feel so cruel anymore. But the struggle wasn't over. The city was harsh, and the nights were colder than she had ever known. Some days she had no energy left. But she remembered her son's laughter, and it gave her the strength of 1,000 suns. Because when life burns you down, love becomes the only light left to follow. One night, as she returned from work, she found Eric coughing under their small blanket. His skin was warm, too warm. Fever. Her heart trembled. She rushed to find a doctor. But every door she knocked on asked for money she didn't have. She held her son close and whispered, "Don't you dare give up on me, Eric. You are my reason to breathe." That night, Elena stayed awake, holding his hand, praying without words. When the first light of dawn touched her face, she looked at her son and smiled through her tears. He was breathing softly. The fever was gone. In that moment, she realized something powerful. Faith isn't about asking for miracles. It's about believing that love is one. The world had taken everything from her. Her home, her comfort, her peace. But it could never take away her courage. Because courage was her second name. And so, in the heart of a sleepless city, a mother and her child learned how to start again. Not with money. Not with help. But with something the world had forgotten. Unshakable love. Years passed, but time never took away the memory of that little boy who once looked at the stars and said, "One day, I'll touch them." Eric grew older. His dreams grew with him. And his mother, Elena, was still the same, strong, gentle, and full of love. She worked long hours, stitched clothes late into the night, and every time she felt tired, she'd look at Eric sleeping beside his schoolbooks and whisper, "For you, my son, everything is worth it." Years of struggle finally bore fruit. Eric got accepted into the best university in the capital. It was everything they had hoped for, but it also meant one thing: he had to leave home. Elena smiled through her tears. She packed his bag herself, folding each shirt with love, placing a small prayer card inside, and whispering to herself, "May every road lead you to kindness." The day of departure arrived. At the bus station, Eric stood with his suitcase, heart pounding with dreams and fear. Elena held his hand tight. "My son," she said softly, "remember, no matter where you go, your kindness will always be your crown." He nodded, his voice trembling, "I'll make you proud, Mother." She smiled, "You already have." The bus engine roared to life. Eric hugged her one last time. Neither spoke. Because sometimes, love doesn't need words. Elena stood there, watching the bus vanish down the road. The dust settled, but her heart didn't. When she returned home, the silence was heavy. His books still open, his laughter echoing in the walls. She sat beside his empty chair and whispered, "This is what love feels like, letting go, even when your heart wants to hold on." Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. And letters began to arrive. Eric wrote about the city lights, the crowded streets, the friends he made, and how much he missed her cooking. Each letter became her treasure. She read them again and again, folded them carefully, and kept them under her pillow, like a piece of her heart she could hold. Meanwhile, Eric was changing. The city was fast, but his mother's voice still echoed in his mind. Her words guided him every time he was lost. He studied hard, worked part-time, and slowly built a name for himself. Years passed. He graduated at the top of his class. Got a good job. And one evening, he called home. "Mother," he said softly, "I'm working now. I can finally take care of you." Her eyes filled with tears. "My son, you already have, with your love." Life started moving faster. Eric was promoted, he sent gifts, wrote fewer letters, and promised, "Soon, I'll visit." But soon never came. 1 year turned into 2. The calls became shorter. The silence between them grew longer. Elena never complained. She would smile at his photo and whisper, "He's busy building the life I prayed for." Yet, every night, she'd sit by the window, watching the empty road, hoping to see him again. Then, one winter evening, a letter arrived, not from Eric, but from his company. It said he had been transferred abroad. Elena read it twice, her hands trembling. Her heart was proud, but quiet. "So far," she whispered, "but still my son." Days turned into months again. Elena grew older. Her hair silvered, her steps slowed, but her faith never faded. Every morning, she would touch his photograph and say, "Keep shining, my son. I'm right here, where you left me." But destiny had one more test waiting. Because love isn't measured in distance, but in the moments that never return. The mother who never stopped believing was about to face the hardest truth, that even the brightest stars fade when the heart forgets to look up. If this story touched your heart, subscribe now, because every soul has a story worth telling, and yours might be the next one. Years passed like pages in a forgotten diary. The city that once excited Eric now felt cold and distant. He had everything he once dreamed of, a good job, success, comfort. But deep inside, there was a quiet emptiness. One night, after a long day at work, he sat by the window of his apartment. Outside, the rain poured endlessly. And suddenly, without reason, he remembered his mother's voice, soft, warm, full of faith. He realized how long it had been since he heard it for real. How long since he had gone home. How long since he said the words she always deserved to hear, "Thank you." Eric couldn't sleep that night. The city lights didn't shine the same anymore. So the next morning, he booked a ticket home. As the train moved through the quiet countryside, memories flooded his heart. His mother's laughter. The smell of her cooking. The tiny home that once held the world for them both. When he finally reached the old town, the streets looked smaller, older. But the feeling of home was still the same. He walked fast, heart pounding. Until he saw the small house, the same one. Paint faded, but still standing strong, like her. He knocked on the door. No answer. He called out, "Mother." "It's me. Eric." Still silence. He pushed the door open gently. Inside, everything was just as he remembered. The wooden chair, the table, the old clock on the wall. But in the corner of the room, he saw her. Sitting quietly in her chair. A soft smile on her face. As if she had just fallen asleep. He ran to her, fell to his knees, and whispered, "Mother. I'm home." Her eyes didn't open. But in that silence, he felt her presence, calm, peaceful, eternal. Next to her chair lay a small box. Inside were all his letters. Neatly folded, tied with a red ribbon. And a note in her handwriting. "For my son, Eric. No matter how far you go, my love will always walk beside you." Tears fell freely as he held that note close to his chest. All the success, all the distance, suddenly meant nothing. He realized that home wasn't a place. It was her. It was love. It was everything he had been searching for in the world. And it had been waiting for him all along. Days later, as he stood by her resting place, he whispered, "You never stopped believing in me. And I promise, I'll spend the rest of my life making sure your faith never goes in vain." From that day on, Eric changed. He returned to his hometown, helped children study, supported single mothers, and told everyone who would listen about the woman who taught him what love truly means. And every evening, as the sun set behind the hills, he'd look up at the sky and whisper, "I hope you're proud of me, Mother." Because the truth was, she always had been. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to Movement of Life. Because here, every story is a heartbeat. And every heartbeat tells a story.